Junior Archivist Zara Ven's fingers trembled as she stared at the quantum oscillation patterns filling her holoscreen. The signal shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, yet there it was, buried in the background radiation of space like a ghost reaching through time itself. "Computer, run authentication sequence beta 9 again," she whispered, her crystalline data implants pulsing with a soft blue light as they interfaced with the archive systems. The results remained unchanged. The signal's encryption matched perfectly with pre-diaspora Earth military protocols, specifically those of the legendary Preservation Force. Zara glanced around the vast archive chamber, its towering data stacks stretching up into darkness. At this hour, she was alone among the ancient records, which was probably for the best. Her discovery would cause more than just controversy. It would shatter 500 millennia of accepted history. The Preservation Force wasn't supposed to be real. Like many stories from the first age of humanity, it was considered more myth than fact. An elite military fleet that supposedly disappeared during humanity's darkest hour, taking with them the pinnacle of Earth's martial knowledge. Yet here was proof, hidden in radiation patterns that had taken Zara 3 years to decode. Her hands moved quickly over the holographic interface, breaking down the signal's components. Most of it remained encrypted, but fragments were becoming clear. Operation Phoenix is live. The enemy we feared, they're coming. Attached were coordinates to a region of space known as the Silence, a sector where ships regularly disappeared without trace. The door to the archive chamber hummed open, and Zara quickly minimized her screens. Senior Archivist Call strode in, his ceremonial robes floating slightly above the polished floor. "Still here, Junior Ven. Your shift ended 3 hours ago." His tone was friendly, but his augmented eyes scanned her workstation with obvious suspicion. "Just finishing some pattern analysis, Senior," Zara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Found some interesting pre-diaspora data fragments." Cole's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ah yes, your ongoing fascination with Earth military history. The Council has concerns about your focus on such primitive subjects. We're a civilization of diplomats and traders now, Ven. The warrior cultures of Earth are best left in the past." "Of course, Senior." Zora nodded respectfully, but her mind was racing. She had seen how the Council handled discoveries they deemed disruptive to galactic society. They would bury this, just like they buried anything that challenged their vision of a perfectly peaceful humanity. Cole lingered for a moment longer before gliding away between the data stacks. Zara waited until the door hummed shut behind him, then began rapidly copying the signal data to her personal quantum core. Her career was probably over, but this was bigger than careers or council politics. The final decoded fragment chilled her to the bone. Temporal stasis holding. Fleet strength at 100%. All warriors present and accounted for. The last resort protocol remains active. Zara's hands moved quickly, sending the coordinates through secure channels to her few trusted contacts in the stellar research fleet. Within hours, she was aboard a transport ship bound for the Silence, her credentials forged well enough to pass initial inspection. They would discover her deception soon enough, but by then it would be too late. As her ship entered hyperspace, Zara reviewed the coordinates again. They pointed to a region where the very fabric of space-time showed signs of manipulation on a massive scale. Whatever waited there had bent the laws of physics themselves to preserve something Earth deemed worth saving for 500,000 years. The decoded fragments played again in her mind. The enemy we feared. They're coming. What enemy could have been so terrible that humanity's greatest warriors chose to preserve themselves through time itself? And more importantly, why was their signal activating now, after 500,000 years of silence? Zara's crystalline implants pulsed faster as she accessed historical records of the region. Ships had been disappearing there with increasing frequency over the past decade. Not just missing. The few fragments of debris recovered showed signs of weapons fire, unlike anything in current galactic databases. The Preservation Force wasn't just sending a signal. They were waking up, and they were defending something. As her ship hurtled through hyperspace, Zara could only hope she would reach the coordinates before the Council realized what she had discovered. Humanity's lost warriors were about to return, and she had a feeling the galaxy would never be the same. The research vessel Stellar Archive dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the silence, its sensors immediately detecting the twisted fabric of space-time. Around them floated the wreckage of previous expedition ships, their hulls bearing strange burn patterns that seemed to eat through even the strongest modern alloys. On the bridge, Zara Venn, now acting under the hastily assumed title of Chief Researcher, studied the debris field with growing concern. These ships were destroyed by targeted particle lance fire, she announced to the nervous crew. Old Earth military tech. The defense systems are still active. Captain Reeves, a veteran of the modern fleet, shook his head. Impossible. No automated system could remain operational for 500,000 years. A warning klaxon cut through the bridge as multiple targeting systems locked onto their ship. Zara's fingers flew across the ancient encryption protocols she had memorized from the archives. This is Chief Researcher Venn transmitting first age recognition codes. Phoenix 7 Delta 0. We come seeking the preservation force. The tense seconds stretched out like hours. Then, miraculously, the targeting locks disappeared. Ahead of them, space itself seemed to ripple and tear, revealing something that took their breath away. 37 massive warships hung in perfect formation, their midnight black hulls adorned with the faded insignia of Earth's combined military forces. Each vessel was a masterpiece of first-age engineering, kilometers long and bristling with weapon systems far beyond anything in the modern arsenal. But it was what surrounded them that defied belief, a temporal stasis field so powerful it had literally frozen a piece of space-time for 500,000 years. As the Stellar Archive approached, the stasis field began to collapse in a carefully controlled sequence. One by one, the ancient warships powered up, their energy signatures dwarfing anything in modern databases. Leading the formation was the flagship Testament, its size making even the largest modern dreadnought look like a shuttlecraft. By the stars, Captain Reeves whispered. The legends were true. The Testament's hangar bay doors opened in silent invitation. As they guided their ship into dock, Zara saw crews of human soldiers moving with practiced efficiency, their powered armor marking them as warriors from humanity's most militant age. Everything about them spoke of lethal capability. The way they moved, the weapons they carried, even their stance. These weren't the diplomats and traitors humanity had become. These were the apex predators of Earth's warrior past. A delegation awaited them in the hangar bay, led by a woman whose very presence commanded attention. Admiral Sarah Chen wore the midnight blue uniform of the combined Earth fleet, her insignia marking her as both a tactical genius and a veteran of the last war. To her, and all the warriors around her, only moments had passed since they enacted the last resort protocol. "Welcome to the Testament," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of command. "I trust by your presence here that the signal was received." Zara stepped forward, trying to control her awe. "Yes, Admiral, though I fear I'm the only one who managed to decode it. The Council would have suppressed the discovery." Chen's expression darkened. "Then humanity has forgotten more than we feared. Show me your current star charts and tactical data. I need to know exactly how much has changed." The next hours were a blur of briefings and revelations. The Preservation Force had spent their time in stasis running endless combat simulations, their minds experiencing centuries of warfare while their bodies remained frozen in time. Each soldier was now a veteran of countless virtual campaigns, their skills honed to perfection. But it was the reason for their preservation that chilled everyone to the bone. Admiral Chen revealed the truth as they stood before a holographic display of the galaxy. "The Nexus swarm isn't extinct as your histories claim," she said, pointing to strange energy signatures at the galaxy's edge. "They're evolved, and they remember us. We were the only species to ever truly hurt them. to drive them back. So they retreated, not in defeat, but to grow stronger, to study us, to become what they feared most, us. She turned to face the shocked modern humans. That's why we preserved ourselves. Not just our bodies and our weapons, but the very essence of humanity's warrior spirit. Because we knew they would return. And now they have. The temporal stasis field finished collapsing, and the full preservation fleet moved into formation. 50,000 warriors of Earth's past, preserved at the height of human military might, ready to fight a war 500 millennia in the making. As Zara watched the fleet power up its ancient but devastating weapons, she realized this was more than just the return of lost warriors. This was humanity's past reaching out to save its future. And the galaxy would soon remember why Earth's warriors were both honored and feared throughout history. The arrival of the preservation fleet at the galactic capital caused immediate chaos. Modern defense systems automatically targeted the ancient warships, while the Testament's gunners locked onto every modern vessel in range. 500 millennia of evolution had changed humanity so much that their own defensive algorithms no longer recognized them as the same species. Admiral Chen stood before the Galactic Council, her midnight blue uniform a stark contrast to their flowing robes and biological enhancements. The council chamber hummed with tension as representatives from every human colony world watched the confrontation unfold. You speak of combat as if it were a virtue, High Counselor Vax said, his biosynthetic eyes scanning Chen's combat decorations with distaste. We have evolved beyond such primitive instincts. Have you? Chen's voice carried across the chamber. Or have you simply forgotten how to fight? The Nexus swarm remembers. They'd spent 500,000 years preparing for this moment. The gallery erupted in argument, but Chen's next words silenced them all. Show me your best. Let them face my warriors in combat trials. Then judge whether we're relics or salvation. The trials began the next day in the capital's massive arena complex. Modern military units, equipped with the latest biotechnology and neural enhancements, faced off against warriors from the Preservation Force. The results were initially one-sided. Centuries of combat simulations had honed the ancient warriors into perfect fighting machines. But everything changed during the 7th trial. Cadet Maya Santos, a young officer from the outer colonies, faced off against Commander Jackson, one of Chen's elite combat specialists. As Jackson launched his attack, something extraordinary happened. Maya's evolved neural architecture activated, her consciousness expanding to process combat data at impossible speeds. She didn't just avoid Jackson's strikes, she predicted them before they began. The battle that followed left everyone stunned. Maya's evolved abilities matched Jackson's perfect technique blow for blow, where he had practiced every possible combat scenario. She could literally see probability paths unfold in real time. The match ended in a draw, but it revealed something crucial. Humanity hadn't grown weaker, just different. Admiral Chen watched the recording a dozen times before calling both fighters to her command center aboard the Testament. Show me exactly what happened, she demanded. Maya demonstrated her abilities, explaining how modern humans had developed latent psychic capabilities, telepathic coordination, enhanced probability calculation, even limited reality manipulation. These weren't weapons or tools, but natural evolutions of the human mind. Fascinating, Chen mused, watching Maya predict the exact trajectory of a thrown object before it moved. We preserved humanity's martial knowledge, but you've evolved entirely new ways of fighting. The next weeks saw an unprecedented exchange of knowledge. Ancient warriors learned to work with evolved humans, whose abilities defy classical physics. Modern soldiers discovered that their psychic powers could be focused through traditional combat disciplines, achieving effects far beyond their normal capabilities. But tensions remained high. Many modern humans saw the Preservation Force as dangerous throwbacks, while the ancient warriors struggled to accept how much their species had changed. The division threatened to tear the fleet apart just as long-range sensors began detecting massive energy signatures approaching the galaxy's edge. During one particularly heated argument in the council chamber, Chen finally lost her patience. "You think we're barbaric? We sacrificed everything. Our lives, our time, our very place in history, to preserve the knowledge humanity would need to survive. We spent subjective centuries in combat simulations while our bodies floated in stasis, all to be ready for this moment. We are not your enemy." She brought up a holographic display of the approaching swarm signatures. "That is our enemy. And they've spent 500,000 years becoming something that can destroy both of us. So you can either help us combine our strengths, or you can watch everything humanity has built fall to a force that never forgot how dangerous we could be." The chamber fell silent as the truth of her words stank in. Humanity had evolved in two different directions, one preserving its martial past, the other developing into something entirely new. Now, as an ancient enemy approached, their only hope lay in finding a way to bridge 500,000 years of divergent evolution. The future of the species would depend on whether humanity's past and present could forge something greater than either of them alone. The border world of New Eden was considered a paradise by modern standards. Its floating cities and crystal spires represented the pinnacle of peaceful human expansion. When the attack came, no one was prepared. The first sign was a quantum disturbance in the upper atmosphere. Before planetary defense systems could react, dark shapes emerged from subspace. Biological ships that seemed to absorb light itself. Modern weapons fired automatically, their energy beams simply disappearing into the creatures' hulls. "This is Admiral Chen to all Preservation Force units." The transmission cut through panic-filled channels. "We have confirmation. Nexus Swarm Scout Force. Initiate Combat Protocol 7. 3 ships from the ancient fleet dropped out of hyperspace, their black hulls reflecting the fires beginning to spread across New Eden's surface. They moved with impossible precision, their weapons targeting specific points on the swarm bioships. Where modern energy weapons had failed, the ancient targeting systems found weakness. On the surface, the real horror began. Swarm ground forces emerged from their landing pods. Twisted amalgamations of biological and mechanical components. They moved with terrifying familiarity, using combat tactics that shocked the observing Preservation Force veterans. "Those are our movements," Commander Jackson whispered, watching through tactical feeds. "They're using modified versions of Earth military formations." A joint team of ancient warriors and evolved humans had been training nearby when the attack began. Led by Maya Santos, now wearing modified Preservation Force armor that worked with her psychic abilities, they engaged the swarm forces directly. The battle that followed would be studied for years to come. Ancient combat techniques merged with evolved human capabilities in real time. Maya's squad could predict swarm movements seconds before they happened, while Preservation Force veterans recognized and countered their own tactics being used against them. But the true breakthrough came when they managed to capture a swarm node alive. Admiral Chen stood in the Testament's analysis chamber, staring at the bioorganic mass floating in a containment field. Its neural patterns were hauntingly familiar. "Run the comparison again," she ordered, her voice tight with controlled anger. The results remained the same. The swarm node's base genetic structure matched perfectly with samples from Chen's final battle 500,000 years ago. But layered throughout its DNA were traces of countless other species, civilizations conquered and absorbed over the millennia. "They've been hunting," Chen realized, reviewing the data. "Every species that aided us in the ancient war. Every civilization that shared our potential for resistance. They didn't just destroy them. They consumed them, learned from them, became them." The tactical implications were staggering. The swarm hadn't spent the last 500,000 years simply evolving. They had systematically eliminated every potential ally humanity might have had, absorbing their knowledge and capabilities. The approaching invasion force would carry the combined military expertise of thousands of extinct civilizations. Most terrifying of all, they had focused specifically on species that had demonstrated the ability to fight alongside humans. The swarm hadn't just been preparing for war, They had been systematically removing humanity's capacity to form the same alliances that had nearly defeated them in the past. In the Testament's war room, Chen shared her findings with both modern and ancient military leaders. "This is why the last resort protocol was necessary," she explained. "We preserved ourselves not just to fight the swarm, but because we knew they would try to erase everything that made humanity's martial culture unique." Maya stepped forward, her evolved senses still reeling from contact with the captured node. "They fear us," she said, "not just what we were, but what we could become. I felt it in their shared consciousness. We're the only species that ever truly threatened them." Chen nodded grimly. "And now they're returning to finish what they started. But they've made one critical mistake." She brought up a tactical display showing the combined strength of the preservation fleet and modern human forces. "They spent 500,000 years becoming what they feared most. In doing so, they'd given us the key to defeating them." As if to emphasize her words, long-range sensors detected more swarm ships entering the galaxy. The Scout Force had been just the beginning. The main invasion would make the ancient war look like a border skirmish. The galaxy was about to learn why the swarm had feared humanity enough to spend 500,000 years preparing for this moment, and why Earth's warriors had gone to such extreme lengths to ensure they would be ready when it came. The Testament's training deck had been completely redesigned, its ancient combat simulators now integrated with modern neural interfaces. Admiral Chen watched as Maya Santos led a group of evolved humans through a series of exercises that would have been impossible 500 millennia ago. "Focus your precognition through the battle meditation stance," Maya instructed, her form perfect despite the advanced modifications to the traditional technique. Around her, training drones moved at impossible speeds, yet her students tracked and neutralized them with a combination of physical combat and psychic manipulation. Commander Jackson stood beside Chen, shaking his head in amazement. "We spent centuries in simulation perfecting these forms. They're learning them in weeks, then improving them in ways we never imagined." The evolution of human capabilities had far exceeded the Preservation Force's predictions. Modern humans possessed incredible gifts: telepathic coordination that could link entire fleets, problem-solving abilities that could calculate battlefield probabilities in real time, and even limited manipulation of local space-time. But these abilities had never been focused through the lens of true combat training. Until now. The breakthrough came during a joint exercise between Preservation Force veterans and evolved human recruits. A squad of modern telepaths linked their consciousness with ancient warriors during a simulated space battle. The result was devastating. The combined force could coordinate an entire fleet's worth of fire with perfect precision, each shot guided by both ancient expertise and evolved awareness. Again, Chen ordered as the simulation reset. This time, incorporate the temporal tactics. The next run was even more impressive. Modern humans used their reality manipulation abilities to create microseconds of distorted time, giving ancient gunners impossible windows of opportunity. Ships that should have been too fast to target were hit with perfect accuracy. But the swarm was far from idle. Reports from the border worlds brought news of horrifying new bioweapons, corrupted versions of ancient Earth military technology combined with absorbed alien knowledge. The enemy had spent 500,000 years, not just studying humanity's tactics, but perfecting them. During one particularly brutal engagement, a swarm strike force demonstrated this evolution in terrifying detail. They deployed what appeared to be organic versions of first-age Earth weapons, each one enhanced by the accumulated knowledge of countless consumed species. "They're not just copying us," Chen realized, watching the battle recordings. "They're improving on everything they learned. Each weapon, each tactic has been refined through 500,000 years of absorbed expertise." The solution came from an unexpected source. A young evolved human named Marcus, barely out of training, noticed something during a neural link with a Preservation Force veteran. The ancient combat forms weren't just physical techniques. They contained embedded patterns of thought, ways of approaching combat that transcended mere movement. Working together, Marcus and the veteran developed a new training protocol. Modern humans began learning not just the physical aspects of ancient combat, but the underlying mental discipline that made Earth's warriors so effective. When combined with their evolved abilities, the results were extraordinary. Teams of linked combat psychics moved with the precision of veteran Spec Ops units. Ancient battle formations were enhanced by probability manipulation. The very fabric of space-time became a weapon in the hands of soldiers who understood both its physical and mental aspects. But the true test came when the Swarm launched a major assault on a core world. A combined force of preservation fleet ships and modern vessels moved to intercept, their crews linked both mentally and through 500 millennia of preserved combat knowledge. The battle that followed rewrote military doctrine. Ancient ships performed maneuvers that should have torn them apart, their structures supported by evolved humans' reality manipulation. Modern psychics coordinated massive fleet actions with a precision that made ancient tactics even more lethal. The Swarm, facing weapons guided by both physical skill and psychic foresight, suffered their first major defeat since the ancient war. But their response chilled even the hardened veterans of the Preservation Force. The enemy began deploying biological weapons that seemed to target specific neural patterns they had spent 500,000 years studying. The next phase of the war would test not just humanity's combined military might, but their very evolution as a species. As Chen reviewed the casualty reports, she knew they needed something more. The combination of ancient and modern capabilities was powerful, but the Swarm had prepared for this moment for too long. They needed to reach deeper into humanity's martial heritage, to awaken something the enemy couldn't possibly have predicted. In the depths of the Testament's vault ships, that heritage waited in perfect preservation, ready to be awakened. The battle for the Centauri Nexus would become a turning point in the war. 30,000 ships hung in the void. The combined might of the Preservation Fleet and modern human forces facing off against the largest Swarm concentration yet encountered. Admiral Chen stood on the Testament's bridge, watching tactical displays light up with enemy signatures. The Swarm had arranged their bioships in a formation that sent chills down her spine. It was an exact mirror of the deployment she had used in her final battle 500,000 years ago. "They're using Gamma Protocol," she announced, her voice carrying across the fleet's linked communications. "They've not just studied it, they've perfected it." The Swarm attack began with devastating precision. Their biological weapons had been engineered specifically to counter Earth military tactics, each one representing 500,000 years of analysis and improvement. Where humanity had preserved their combat knowledge, the Swarm had evolved it into something terrifying. Maya's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral, the psychic teams are in position. We're detecting temporal distortions throughout the Swarm fleet. They're trying to predict our movements just like we predict theirs." The battle quickly evolved into something beyond traditional space combat. Modern human psychics linked with Preservation Force gunners, their combined abilities creating impossible shots through gaps in space-time. Ancient ships performed maneuvers that defied physics, their hulls protected by evolved humans manipulating reality around them. But the Swarm had prepared for this. Their bioships began emitting neural patterns that disrupted psychic coordination. Weapons that had been perfectly synchronized suddenly fired milliseconds apart, missing their targets. The enemy wasn't just using human tactics. They were actively countering humanity's evolution. "They're inside our decision loop," Chen realized, watching her own strategies being used against her. "Every tactic we deploy, they've already simulated and countered." They spent 500 millennia practicing this exact battle. The turning point came from an unexpected source. A young psychic named Sarah, linked with a Preservation Force tactical team, noticed something crucial. The Swarm's perfect execution of human combat techniques had an underlying pattern. They were running through variations like a computer, each one optimized but ultimately predictable. "They learned our moves," Sarah transmitted across the fleet. "But they never learned to improvise." Chen understood immediately. The swarm had spent 500,000 years analyzing and perfecting human military doctrine, but they had missed something essential: the chaos, the creativity, the human element that made those tactics work in the first place. All ships, initiate randomized combat protocols, Chen ordered. Break every rule. Ignore optimal solutions. I want pure human chaos. What followed was perhaps the strangest space battle in history. Ships deliberately performed suboptimal maneuvers. Gunners took impossible shots. Psychics introduced random variables into their calculations. The carefully preserved perfection of Earth's military knowledge was suddenly wrapped in a layer of pure, unpredictable humanity. The swarm's response was telling. Their formations began to break down as they encountered scenarios they hadn't simulated. Their perfect execution of human tactics became a weakness. They could only respond with what they had learned, not adapt to what they were experiencing. The combined fleet pressed their advantage. Ancient weapons guided by modern intuition cut through swarm defenses. Preservation Force Marines, linked with evolved human psychics, boarded enemy vessels with devastating effectiveness. The enemy's 500,000 years of preparation began to unravel in the face of something they couldn't quantify: human improvisation. But victory came at a terrible cost. A third of the combined fleet was destroyed. Thousands of the Vault humans suffered neural damage from the swarm's psychic weapons. Even the mighty ships of the Preservation Force, built to withstand the worst of the ancient war, showed signs of strain. In the aftermath, Chen studied the battle data with growing concern. They had won by surprising the enemy, but that advantage wouldn't last. The swarm would adapt, would learn from this defeat just as they had learned from every encounter with humanity. As casualty reports streamed in, Chen made a decision. It was time to reveal the true purpose of the Last Resort Protocol. What really lay in stasis aboard the Preservation Fleet's Vault ships. They had preserved more than just military knowledge and warriors. They had preserved humanity's entire martial heritage, waiting for the moment when it would be needed most. The next phase of the war would require awakening something that had slept for 500,000 years, the combined fighting spirit of every great warrior culture Earth had ever produced. The Vault ships of the Preservation Fleet had always been a mystery, larger than carriers but carrying no fighters, heavily armored but bearing no weapons. Now, as Admiral Chen led the Combined Military Council through their cavernous holds, that mystery was finally revealed. The Last Resort Protocol wasn't just about preserving our fleet, Chen explained, gesturing to rows of stasis chambers that stretched into darkness. We preserved everything: genetic templates, neural patterns, combat data from every warrior culture Earth ever produced. The chambers contained more than mere DNA samples. Each one held the complete essence of a warrior tradition: the physical forms, mental disciplines, and accumulated combat knowledge of humanity's greatest fighters. Spartans and samurai, special forces operators and tribal warriors, all preserved at the peak of their capabilities. The modern council reacted with shock and some fear. "You want to clone ancient warriors?" High Counselor Vax demanded. "Create some kind of primitive army." Chen's response was to activate a single chamber. The figure that emerged was a legend even in the First Age. Master Sergeant Sarah Connor, one of Earth's most decorated special operations commanders. She assessed the situation instantly, her enhanced mind processing 500 millennia of change in moments. "The swarm's using echo formation," Connor said, studying tactical displays of recent battles. "But they've modified the flanking approach. There's a weakness in their adaptation they don't even realize." The council watched in stunned silence as Connor broke down swarm tactics that had baffled their best analysts. She wasn't just reciting military doctrine. She was seeing patterns that only a human mind, trained to the absolute peak of tactical thinking, could recognize. The decision to proceed was unanimous. Modern cloning facilities, far more advanced than anything the First Age had possessed, began the revival process. But this was more than simple genetic recreation. Each warrior awakened with centuries of combat data integrated into their consciousness, their minds enhanced by the same stasis technology that had preserved the preservation fleet. The results exceeded Egon Chen's expectations. A squad of Navy SEALs seamlessly integrated modern psychic abilities into their close-quarters combat techniques. Samurai masters taught evolved humans to channel their reality manipulation powers through ancient forms of mental discipline. Apache warriors, their already formidable tracking skills enhanced by modern technology, led devastating strikes against swarm hive clusters. But the true power lay in how these warriors adapted to the present. They weren't relics or simple soldiers. They were the distilled essence of humanity's martial spirit, preserved perfectly but ready to evolve. Each one represented not just fighting skill, but the peak of human combat innovation in their time. Maya worked closely with a revived Shaolin master, learning how to merge psychic precognition with techniques developed over thousands of years of meditation and combat. The combination created something entirely new, a fighting style that existed simultaneously in the past, present, and future. The swarm's response was immediate and brutal. They launched massive attacks against the cloning facilities, desperate to prevent more warriors from awakening. But they encountered something they hadn't expected: humans who had spent their entire lives adapting to seemingly impossible odds. A revived Spartan phalanx, supported by modern energy shields and linked by evolved human telepathy, held a critical space station against overwhelming numbers. Ancient tribal hunters, their intimate understanding of tracking and ambush enhanced by modern stealth technology, devastated swarm supply lines. In orbit around a contested world, Connor led a mixed force of special operations veterans from across time, each one enhanced by modern technology and linked with evolved human coordinators. They boarded and captured a swarm command node, providing invaluable intelligence about enemy operations. But it was the psychological impact that proved most significant. The swarm had spent 500,000 years studying and perfecting first-age military doctrine. Now they faced the combined martial knowledge of humanity's entire history, each warrior tradition bringing its own approach to combat, its own way of innovating and adapting. Chen watched as more chambers awakened, each one releasing warriors who had quite literally shaped human history. They weren't just soldiers, they were living embodiments of humanity's endless capacity to rise up against impossible odds. The next phase of the war would test whether this combination of ancient wisdom and modern power could stand against an enemy that had spent 500,000 years preparing for this moment. But as Chen watched warriors from across time prepare for battle, she knew they had achieved something the swarm could never replicate: the rebirth of humanity's complete martial heritage, ready to fight for survival once again. The final battle ignited across 3,000 light-years of space, a conflict so vast it would reshape the galaxy itself. The swarm had committed their entire invasion force, millions of bioships carrying the accumulated knowledge of 500,000 years of preparation. Against them stood the combined might of humanity's past and present, united in a way the enemy could never have predicted. Admiral Chen commanded from the Testament's bridge, but she was no longer alone in directing the war effort. The neural network linking the fleet hummed with the presence of humanity's greatest military minds from across time, each one adding their unique perspective to the battle. Modern dreadnoughts moved with the precision of ancient fighter craft, their evolved human crews linking with revived ace pilots to perform maneuvers that defied conventional physics. Preserved Earth warships, their weapons guided by the combined expertise of 500 millennia of combat experience, cut through swarm formations with devastating accuracy. On the ground, the battle reached mythological proportions. Spartan phalanxes, their ancient discipline enhanced by modern energy shields and psychic coordination, held critical choke points against waves of swarm bioforms. Samurai masters led evolved human strike teams, their blades wreathed in reality-warping energy as they cut through enemy ranks. Special forces teams from across history, each one representing the peak of human tactical innovation in their time, conducted impossible raids into the heart of swarm hive clusters. Their movements were guided by Apache trackers, enhanced by modern technology, and linked with psychic coordinators who could see every possible branch of combat before it happened. But the swarm had not spent 500,000 years idle. They deployed weapons that targeted specific neural patterns, trying to disrupt the unprecedented coordination between past and present. Bioships shifted and adapted, attempting to counter every human tactic they had ever encountered. The turning point came when Maya, working with a revived Shaolin master, discovered something extraordinary. The swarm's adaptive capabilities, impressive as they were, followed a pattern. They had spent 500,000 years learning to be human, but in doing so, they had lost what made them unique. They're trapped, Maya transmitted across the fleet. They've become a copy of what they feared, but without the one thing they could never replicate: our ability to transcend our own limitations. Chen understood immediately. The swarm had perfected human military doctrine, but they had lost the chaos, the creativity, the raw human spirit that made those tactics work. They had become a shadow of humanity, perfect in form, but lacking the essence that gave that form meaning. The order went out across the combined fleet. Break pattern. Fight with your hearts, not just your minds. Show them what they could never copy: the human soul in battle. What followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ancient warriors and evolved humans moved as one, each bringing their own unique strength to the fight. Modern ships performed maneuvers based on techniques that hadn't been seen in 500,000 years. Preservation Force veterans adapted their perfect discipline to support strategies that defied conventional logic. The swarm, faced with the full spectrum of human combat potential, began to falter. Their perfectly copied tactics couldn't adapt to the sheer creativity being deployed against them. For the first time in their existence, they faced an enemy that was both utterly familiar and completely unpredictable. Victory, when it came, was absolute. The swarm's unified consciousness, confronted with the full magnitude of human martial potential, began to break apart. Their bioships, designed to counter specific human capabilities, couldn't adapt to the overwhelming variety of combat approaches being used against them. In the aftermath, as the combined fleet secured their victory, Chen realized the true purpose of the last resort protocol. They hadn't preserved Earth's warriors just to win a war. They had preserved the very essence of human combat evolution, ensuring that humanity would never lose its capacity to face any challenge. The galaxy would remember this day not just as a military victory, but as the moment when humanity's past and future finally united. The Preservation Force had done more than save their species. They had ensured that the full spectrum of human martial knowledge would survive to protect future generations. As the fires of battle faded, a new civilization began to emerge, one that combined the wisdom of the past with the potential of the future, ready to face whatever challenges the universe might hold. The warriors of Earth had returned not just to fight a war, but to remind humanity of everything they could become.